hayas como cuna hasta el tan dulce es tu color mezclándose a la lluvia. Todos se recogen a tu alrededor. Qué hermosa es tu floración. Como una ventana de pabellones. Ellos no verán que tus hayas como cuna recogen adentro de sí lágrimas de lluvia. Mas ellos no lo verán porque no quieren ver y saber que tienes mucho todo el mundo te sonríe. Ninguna inocente te admira tu hermosura. Te admira tu hermosura. Descubrirás de tus labios maravillosas. A esconderé tus letras. בעיניים צוחקות, מזמרת טבעות, מזמרת טבעות, היא עוד מזמרת. ורגליה הקלות את הקצב ונוטות, אין לה יום ואין לילות, היא עוד מזמרת. לילה ברנה יומה, הרחוב כולו דממה, היא עוד מזמרת. לילה ברנה יומה, הרחוב כולו דממה, היא עוד מזמרת. אמרי לי מה ellos multiplicaron, mas ya no son cante de criaturas. Puertas se cerraron, canales se taparon, en la calle ante crecites las personas tan cansadas. Y tú pasarás por aquí, no entenderás de quién tu corazón se quema del fuego del descariño en la calle donde creciste. No se sienten pasos, no hay horror de crías, no hay son de bicicleta. La risa tan musafira descayó la color de las chicas. Solo la solitud es habitante fixa. En la calle donde creciste, no hay Shabbates y fiestas. Los minutos que pasan están prisioneros en las argullas de la hora. El tiempo se entesó aquí, el respiro se debilita en la calle ande crecientes
shoot. I just realized there was no sound. Okay, now there's sound. So everything I've said has been null and void. Okay. Okay. That's the way it goes. As I was just saying, I'm going to try to read the Torah, and I'm trying to understand better each week what the ancient pronunciation was. Of course, nobody really knows. There are a lot of different guesses, and of course, it varied regionally. Okay, but I'm going to try my best to take do what some people think was the ancient pronunciation, and that's a work in progress. Each week I do it, or each time I learn something new, then I try to add something a little bit to it. So don't expect it to be perfect, but it's hopefully a decent attempt, or my best attempt. Let's put it that way. Okay, so we're in Exodus chapter 25, verse 1. Let me just make sure that everything is coming up the way it should be. This should be all the way over here. Oh shoot, that's not what I meant to do. Let's do this. Okay. And so this should really be here. This should be here. I don't know. Should I stick this? I'll stick this on the end. Okay. Just to arrange things a little bit better. Okay. There we go. So, okay. So I'm going to start reading. Exodus 25. 1. Why yidaber Yehovah. And by the way, I must say I've been watching a lot of lectures lately on other opinions of what the name is, and I am beginning to think that the pronunciation Yehovah may not be correct, but more news on that in the future. In the meantime, I will just stick with Yehovah until I come up with the reasons for my opinion. Okay. וידבר יהוה אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ויקחו לי תרומה מאת כל איש אשר ידבנו ליבו. תיקחו את תרומתי, וזאת התרומה אשר תיקחו מאיתון זהב וכסף ונחושת ותכלת וארגמן ותולעת שני ושש ועזים. 1 second here. Just get something for myself. ואורות אלים מאדומים ואורות תחושים ועצי שיטים, שמן למאור, בשמים לשמן המשחה ולקטורת הסמים, אבני שוחם ואבני מילואים לאפוד ולחושן. ועשו לי מקדש ושכנתי בתוכם ככל אשר אני מראה אותך את תבנית המשכן ואת תבנית כל כלוב וכן תעשו. Verse 10. ועשו ארון עצי שיטים אמותיים וחצי אורכו ועמו וחצי רוחבו ועמו וחצי קומתו. 1 second. I'm sorry, that was וחצי. Okay. וצפית אותו זהב טהור מבית ומחוץ. תצפנה ועשית עליו זר זהב סביב. ויצקת לו 4 טבעות זהב ונתת על 4 פעמותיו ושתי טבעות על צלעו האחד ושתי טבעות על צלעו השנית. ועשית בדי עצי שיטים וציפית אותם זהב והבאת את הדמים בטבעות על צלעות האורון לשאת את האורון. I'm trying a new thing with it. I'm trying to make a distinction between the kamatz and the patach. So please bear with me. It's a little bit difficult because I'm not used to it. In modern Hebrew, the kamatz and the patach are pronounced the same, but I'm trying to now be a little bit more careful with pronouncing the kamatz. This is a kamatz, something between an ah and an o. So it'd be like ah, but it may come out sounding like an ah sometimes, or it may come out sounding like an o sometimes. So I'm still working on that. So ha'oron bohem be tabaot ha'aron iyu habadim lo yasuru mimenu we natato el ha'oron et ha'idut asher iten elecha. We asito kaporet zahav tahor we amotayim wahetzi arko we amah wahetzi rochba we asito shnayim kiruvim zahav miksho aseh otam mishne kitzot kaporet we aseh kiruv echod mi katza mize ukruv echod mi katza mize min hakaporet ta'asu et ha-keruvim al shnei kitzotov vehayu ha-keruvim poretzei knofayim limolo sochachim bekanfehem al hakaporet ופניהם איש אל אחיו אל הכפורת יהיו פני הקרובים ונתת את הכפורת על הארון מלמעלה ואל הארון תיתן את העדות אשר אתן אליך ונודעתי לך שם ודיברתי איתך מעל הכפורת מבין שני הקרובים אשר על ארון העדות את כל אשר אצווה אותך על El Bnei Israel. Okay, so we are in Exodus chapter 25. We're about to start verse 23. Exodus 25:23. Okay. We osito shulchon atzei shitim amotayim orko. See, I'm still working on it. Orko sounds like a cholom, but I don't want to say it arko. I want to say like arko. Okay, I'll try my best until I get used to it. Orko. Ve'omo roch bo. Ve'omo wa chatzi komato watzipito oto zohov tohor. Ve'asito lo zer zohov soviv. Ve'asito lo misgeret tofah soviv. Ve'asito zer zohov miskarto soviv. ועשית לו 4 טבעות זהב, ונתתו את הטבעות על 4 הפאות אשר ל4 רגליו, לעומת המסגרת תהיינה הטבעות לבתים לבדים לשאת את השולחן, ועשית את הבדים עצי שיטים, ציפית אותם זהב ונישא בם את השולחן ועשית כאורותיו וחפותיו וקשותיו ומנקותיו אשר יוסח בהם זהב טהור תעשה אותם ונתתו על השולחן להם פונים Bifonai Tomid. Okay, we're in verse 31. Maybe I'm going to switch back to the regular reading because it's I really would like to make a distinction between there's a reason that the master pointed some words with a patach and some words with a kamatz. It's supposed to have different sounds, or else they would have just pointed everything with a kamatz or patach. Okay, we'll try a little bit more. ועשית מנורת זהב טהור מקשה תעשה מנורה יריחו וקנה גביעיה כפתוריה ופרחיה ממנו יהיו, ושישה קונים יוצאים מצידיה, שלושה קני מנורה מצידו האחד, ושלושה קני מנורה מצידו השני, שלושה רביעים משוקדים בקונה האחד, כפתור ופרח, ושלושה גביעים משוקדים בקונה האחד, כפתור ופרח כן לששת קונים היוצאים מן המנורה, ומנורה ארבעה גביעים משוקדים כפתורהו ופרחיה, וכפתור תחת שני הקונים ממנו, וכפתור תחת שני הקונים ממנה, וכפתור תחת שני הקונים ממנו, לששת הקונים היוצאים מן המנורה, כפתוריהם וקנותם ממנו יהיו כולה מקשה אחת זהב טהור, ועשית את נרותיה שבעה, והעלה את נרותיה, והאיר על עבר בוניה, ומלקוחיה, ומחטותיה זהב טהור. Verse 39. כיכר זהב טהור יעשה אותה את כל הכלים האלה, וראה ועשה בתבניתם אשר אתם מוראה בהור. Okay. So we are in Exodus 26, the 10 curtains of the tabernacle. Shabbat Shalom, Raphael Mike. Good to see you. Long time no speak. Hope all is well with you. Shabbat Shalom. ואת המשכן תעשה 10 יריעות, 6 משזור ותכלת וארגמון ותולעת שני קרובים מעשה חושב תעשה אותם. אורך היריעה האחת 28 באמה, ורחב 4 באמה היריעה האחד, מידה אחת לכל היריעות. 5 היריעות תהיינה חוברות אישה אל אחותו, ו5 יריעות חוברות אישה אל אחותו, ועשית לולאות תכלת על שפת היריעה האחד מקוצה בחוברת, וכן תעשה בשפת היריעה הקיצונה במחברת השנית, ו50 לולאות תעשה ביריעה האחד, ו50 לולאות תעשה בקצה היריעה אשר במחברת השנית, מקבילות הלולאות אישה אל אחותו. ועשית 50 קרסי זהב, וחיברת את היריעות אישה אל אחותה בקרסים, והיה המשכן אחד. Okay, we are in Exodus chapter 26, verse 7. Exodus chapter 26, verse 7. ועשית יריעות עזים לאוהל על המשכן 12 יריעות תעשה אותם. אורך היריעה האחת 30 באמה, ורוחב 4 באמה היריעה האחד, מידה 1 ל12 יריעות. וחיברת את 5 היריעות לבד, ואת 6 היריעות לבד, וכפלת את היריעה השישית אל מול פני האוהל, ועשית 50 לולאות על שפת היריעה האחד קיצונה, בחוברת ו50 לולאות על שפת היריעה החוברת השנית. ועשית פרסי נחושת 50 והבאת את הכרסים בלולאות וחיברת את האוהל וחיה אחד וסרח העודף ביריעות האוהל חצי היריעה העודפת ותסרח על אחרי המשכן והאמה מזה בעודף באורך יריעות האוהל יהיה סרוח על צידי המשכן מזה ומזה לכסותו ועשית מכסה לו אוהל אורות אלים מאדמים מכסה אורות תחושים מלמעלה. Oh, that's it. Okay, so that's Exodus. We got up to Exodus 26:11 again. I'm trying the best I can, and I'm working on doing a more exact, what some people believe was an ancient Hebrew pronunciation, and that involves many different things. But one of the things I've been working on lately, which I've been ignoring in the past, is trying to make a distinction between the kamats. This is the kamats right here. And the patach, that's the patach right there. So these are two different vowels, right? So obviously they're two different vowels. They should have, in theory, they should have two different sounds, okay? Or else they could all be pointed with one vowel. So I've been working on that. I'm sorry if it sounds a little bit clunky. I'm trying my best. Over time, it will improve. I don't ever pretend to be perfect in anything. I don't pretend to be. I try to be an honest searcher for the truth, and an honest searcher for the truth means looking like an idiot and a fool sometimes, and admitting that you always have more to learn. So that's fine. I hope over time I'll get it to the point where it becomes more flowing. But that's what I'm attempting to do this week. So I mean, when I do it, there are a lot of things. For instance, the ayin, okay, is pronounced as a it's pronounced as a guttural. The kuf is pronounced as a also as a guttural. There are many ways that they believe that ancient Hebrew was pronounced, but of course nobody knows for sure. There are a number of different theories out there, but this seems to be the one that's most accepted. Okay, so we are in Exodus 26 verse 15. We osita et ha koroshim la mishkon atse shitim ondim eser amot orech קורש, ואמה וחצי אמה רוחב הקרש אחד, שתי יודות לקרש האחד משולבות אישה אל אחותה, כן תעשה לכל קרשי המשכן, ועשית את הקרשים למשכן 20 קרש בפאת נגבה תימונה ו40 אדני כסף תעשה תחת 20 הקרש, 2 אדונים תחת הקרש האחד, לשתי ידותיו ו2 אדונים תחת הקרש האחד לשתי ידותיו, ולצלע המשכן השנית לפאת צפון 20 קורש ו40 אדניהם כסף, 2 אדונים תחת הקרש האחד ו2 אדונים תחת הקרש האחד, ולירכתי המשכן יומה תעשה 6 קרשים ו2 קרשים תעשה למקצועות המשכן בירכתיים ויהיו תואמים מלמטה ויחדו יהיו תמים על ראשו אל הטבעת האחת, כן יהיה לשניהם ולשני המקצועות יהיו, והיו 8 קרשים ואדניהם כסף 16 אדונים, 2 אדונים תחת הקרש האחד ו2 Adonim tachat hakeresh ha'echad. So this is a lot of details about building the Mishkan, right? And we'll go through the parsha later, but it's going to be how can I say? It's a little bit technical. Would be a nice way of saying it. Maybe a little bit boring would be another way of saying it. Am I allowed to call the Torah boring? I mean, there are boring parts of the Torah, right? Where like you have the census of each of the tribes and you get the numbers. Okay, you feel like you want to skip that part, but well, what I'm going to try to do later when we do the study is when I was in Israel. Last time I was in Israel in 2019. And if you ever get to Israel and go down to Eilat, just north of Eilat, in a place called Timna. Timna Park is a replication, an imitation of a life-size imitation of the Mishkan, and they do tours of it. And I cannot tell you how much it brings these words to life. Because when you have a description, okay, let's say I would describe, I don't know, the Empire State Building. Okay, it's I don't know how tall it is. I forgot. 1,200 feet tall, and it has 50,000 windows, and it's and on the outside it's beige, and it has it has a beautiful it's a picture is worth 1,000 words. And here what we're doing is describing a picture which was put into place by the Israelites, right? So it's a little bit, the description is a little bit dry. And if there's any way that it can be brought to life, then that's worth it. I mean, there are videos out there that and maybe I'll even play one of those later, that kind of, show how this was built, or how it looked once it was built. We're talking about the Mishkan, the tabernacle, of course. But if you're ever in Israel and you're ever down by Eilat, about I think it's about 45 minutes north of Eilat, is a place called Timna Park. And in Timna Park, they've built it's a replicate of the Mishkan, and they give tours. When we were there, we had this very, very, very knowledgeable young man. I don't know what he was. He definitely had Karaite tendencies. I don't know if he was secular or Karaite. He might have had Christian tendencies. I couldn't really tell, but whatever the case was, he really, really knew his stuff. And he was giving tours of the Mishkan. It really brought everything to life. So just keep that in mind. The best way, I think, to understand this parsha is really to either watch videos where you see pictures of it, or to visit an actual replica of the Mishkan if you're in Israel. I don't know if they have other ones around the world. But all right, here we go. We're in Exodus chapter 26, verse 26. ועשית בריחים עצי שיטים 5 לקרשי צלע המשכון אחד, ו5 בריחים לקרשי צלע המשכון השנית, ו5 בריחים לקרשי צלע המשכון לירכותיים יומה, והבריח התיכון מתוך הקרשים מבריח מן הקוצה אל הקוצה, ואת הקרשים תצפה זהב, ואת טבעותיהם תעשה זהב, בתים לבריחים, וצפית את הבריחים זהב, והקים אותו את המשכן המשפטו אשר הראתו בהר. So here we go, oral law, right? This is what one of the things that the rabbis point. We'll talk about this later more. Point to is an oral law, right? That Moshe was shown the design. Okay, it says here, so you should establish it, or you should build it according to you should build the Mishkan, the tabernacle, according to the judgment, literally, but according to the rules which you saw, were shown to you on the mountain. Okay, so does this really constitute an oral law? No, it constitutes, I guess, a visual law, because it was shown to Moshe. But it certainly doesn't provide. I've heard rabbis try to argue that this is proof that there's an oral law, that there are things that are not written down in the Torah. And it's very possible that there are things that are not written down in the Torah. I mean, the Israelites lived on a day-to-day basis, and there are many things that they did and that they heard, and day-to-day instructions that were probably not written down in the Torah. But does that constitute an oral law that was passed down from generation to generation? Now, many times Karaites are kind of, shall I say, stupid in their response, and they try to reject the entire idea of an oral law or of a living tradition. And I never take that much of an extreme. I always say there might have been some things that went all the way back to the time of Moses or to the time of the Tanakh, but then prove it, okay? Because what the rabbis did is it's kind of like in the fog of war, shall we say? They brought in their own laws. They operate like all criminals. They operate in darkness, right? So as Israel moved away, or as it sinned, and the nation moved away from its original culture, a lot of confusion arose, right? And that's when the rabbis were able to move in, and they were able to say, well, they were able to bring in all kinds of laws, which they refer to as oral law, which they refer to as from Moshe at Sinai. They do that a lot of times, right? And there's no way of checking it because in the fog of time after Israel sinned and lost its original culture, there was no way of knowing exactly what might have come from ancient times and what might not have come from ancient times. So the rabbis were able to move in and install their own laws, and then lay them back on the ancient times, or lay them back on Moses. It's kind of like the oldest trick in the book, right? So when I speak against the oral law, I say there might be some elements of the oral law that go all the way back, like this pronunciation, right, or the reading of of Hebrew. No, that's not even clear. Okay, that may go back to very ancient times, but there are many parts of the rabbinical oral law that the rabbis want to say go back to ancient times, which do not go back to ancient times. For instance, tefillin, right, and that could be definitively proven, okay, by looking at first of all the context of the meaning of those verses, but then also the history, that there is no indication of tefillin before Second Temple period times, or in fact middle Second Temple period times, right? So yeah, so that's that. All right, let's continue on. So we are in Exodus chapter 26, verse 31. Once again, we have to go to Exodus 27. Oops, where'd that go? To go to 27:19. All right. So we're in 26:31. I will continue to try to do my new improved biblical Hebrew reading, making a distinction between the komats and the patach. And I'm sure it will improve over time. I may even change it. There are other opinions that's not an awe, that's more like an ah, that. Maybe I'll try to change it more like an ah or something like that. I don't know. I'm going to work on it. At any rate, we asita parochet cheret we argoman we tol'at shoni washesh mashzor ma'aseh חושב יעשה אותו קירובים ונתת אותו על ארבעה עמודי שיטים מצופים זהב ووهم that's hooks זהב על ארבעה אדני כוסף ונתת את הפורחת תחת הכרסים והבאת שמה מבית לפורחת את ארון העדות והבדילה הפורחת לכם בין הקודש ובין קודש הקודשים ונתת את הכפרת על ארון העדות בקודש הקודשים ושמת את השולחן מחוץ לפורחת ואת המנורה נוכח השולחן על סלע המשכון תימונה והשולחן תיתן על סלע צפון. Okay, we are in Exodus 26, chapter 26, verse 36. ועשית מסך לפתח האוהל תכלת וארגמן ותולעת שני ושש משזר מעשה רוקם ועשית למסך 5 עמודי שיטים וספית אותם זהב ובהם זהב ויצקת להם 5 אדני נחושת. Okay, we are now in Exodus 27 and going down to 19. ועשית את המזבח עצי שיטים 5 אמות אורך ו5 אמות רוחב רבוע יהיה המזבח ו3 אמות קומתו ועשית קרונותיו על 4 פינותיו ממנו תהיינו קרנותיו וצפית אותו נחושת ועשית סיר אותו לדשנו ויעל ומזרעותיו ומזלגותיו ומחטותיו לכל כליו תעשה נחושת ועשית לו מחבור מעשה רשת נחושת ועשית על הרשת 4 טבעות נחושת על 4 קצותיו ונתת אותו תחת קרקוב המזבח מלמטה והייתה רשת עד חצי המזבח ועשית בדים למזבח בדי עצי שיטים וצפית אותם נחושת והובא את בדיו בטבעות וחיו הבדים על 2 צלעות המזבח בסט אותו נבוב לוחות תעשה אותו אשר הראה אותך בהור כן יעשו. Exodus chapter 27 verse 9 ועשית את חצר המשכן לפעת נגב תמונה כלאים לחצר 6 מושזר 100 באמה אורך לפאה האחד ועמודיו 20 ועדניהם 20 נחושת והעמודים וחשוקיהם כוסף וכן נפעת צפון באורך כלאים 100 אורך ועמודיו 20 ועדניהם 20 נחושת והעמודים וחשוקיהם כוסף ורוחב החצר לפעת יום כלאים 50 אמה עמודיהם 10 ועדניהם 10 ורוחב החצר לפעת קדמה מזרחה 50 אמה ו15 אמה כלאים לכתף עמודיהם 3 ועדניהם 3 ולכתף השנית 15 כלאים עמודיהם 3 ועדניהם 3 ולשאר החצר מסך 20 אמה תכלת וארגמן ותולעת שני ו6 מושזר מעשה רוקם עמודיהם ו4 ועדניהם 4 כל עמודי החצר סביב מחושקים כסף והם כסף ועדניהם נחושת אורך החצר 100 באמה ורוחב 50 ב50 וקומה 5 אמות 6 מושזר ועדניהם נחושת בכל כלי המשכן בכל עבודותיו בכל ידותיו בכל ידות החצר נחושת. And that's the end of the parsha. Okay, so first of all, any questions, any comments? Would anyone like to say anything or comment about anything? So we have plenty of time. It's kind of a short parsha. We have about another hour or so. Let's go back to Exodus 25 and let's maybe try to start analyzing a little bit. And what I would like to do, well, maybe I'll do it for the afternoon studies. I'm going to try to dig up that video that I have from when I visited Timna Park and play it. And I think that's really the best way to kind of understand this stuff. But let's try to go through. So we're starting in Exodus chapter 25, verse 1. And let's try to go through and start understanding a bit more. Okay. Why yidaber Yehovah? Again, I'm also working on maybe revising my opinion of what the name is, and that's more to come in following weeks. But for now, I'm going to stick to Yehovah. I've been watching a video series which has really opened my eyes, and I'll be sharing that video series. It really made clear some things that are going on with the pronunciation of the name. Okay, at any rate, we daber Yehovah el Moshe lemor daber el bnei Israel. So we're in Exodus 25, verse 2 now. Daber el bnei Israel we ikuli Terumah. Okay, so Terumah is a donation or a free will. How do they translate it here? Okay, excuse me, an offering. Let's analyze this word a little bit. So this comes from taram. The underlying root is taram. And in modern Hebrew, litrom means to donate. Okay, so if you want to donate to a charity, say litrom. So I just want to see if there's any other nuances, contribution, offering for sacred uses, Terumah, offering for sacred uses, earliest use. So let's see where it appears first, just out of curiosity, right here. This is associated, really, we can see from Exodus 25. It's what shok Terumah asher unaf. Israel ki Terumah hu Terumah Terumah. Okay. All right. I guess we'll just leave it at that. Right now, that it's some kind of offering. If there is. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so Terumah is just a sacred offering. Okay, so דבר בני ישראל ויקחו לי תרומה מאת כל איש אשר ידבנו ליבו. Okay, so any person who has the need to give an offering, so he can bring the offering. And yidabenu, so here's another word that we'll look up for a second. Okay. Right. So this is like a nidiva. Okay. Nadav. So here we have yidavenu. So just 1 second here. Yeah. So this is going to be the future or the imperfect form of nadav. Okay. To donate or to give. Okay. To give freely. Okay. Just 1 second here. Let's see one thing. All right. Okay. Yeah. Libo. So is anyone whose heart feels the need or gives them the need to donate this terumah, right? The sacred offering, then he should. Okay. Techu et terumati. Let me just read that again. Daber el bnei Israel v'itchu li terumah ve'et kol ish asher yidabenu libo techu et terumati. Okay. So v'zot terumah asher tikchu me'itom. So now this is what they're looking for. This is what we're gathering. We have zahav, gold, kesef is silver, nechoshet is copper or bronze. Tchelet, oh boy, that's a big one, right? But so tchelet, we know that on the tzitzit, on the tzitzit kanaf, we're supposed to put a petit tchelet. We're supposed to put a string of a tchelet. So the question is tchelet a substance, or is tchelet a color? Okay. Well, I think it's pretty clear that it's a color in the way it's used. Okay, and I'm not going to get into the whole thing right now because we'll get onto this long, endless sidetrack. But let's just look for a second. Okay. Okay, so this is all with the building of the Mishkan. The blue, pomegranates of blue and purple. You shall fasten a blue cord, blue, blue, blue. Let's get past Exodus a little bit. Okay, so we get past Exodus, which is all going to be basically giving of the tabernacle. And let's see here. So that's that. Beged el beged techelet u'ksotam. Ksu beged techelet. Ksu beged techelet. Techelet. Shesh masar v'techelet. So now we're already back to Exodus. Okay. Pomegranates of blue and purple. Efod b'til techelet. 1 second here. Just trying to see if there's any place where it's not associated with, let's say, a dye, but it's just associated with a color in general. So this is all techelet. Perhaps, let's see here for 1 second. The pomegranates. So the pomegranates, it's 3924. I'm just going to run to the English for a second just to make it go a bit more quickly. And this is the robe. They made pomegranates, so it would not tear. They made pomegranates of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn. So it definitely does seem that the word techelet, at least it's like seeing the Tanakh, is always associated with a dye. Okay, it's not just a color; it's the color of a dye. Let me just see a little bit more here. We go to Chronicles. That's that. Goldsmith, violet, and purple. It's Jeremiah. 1 second, but it's probably going to be the same thing. Divusham, yeah, so that has to do also with clothing. Hur karpas v'tchelet, oh, that's Esther, that's famous. Okay, and that's hangings. So tchelet definitely seems to be dyed wool, or a color of dyed wool, right? Or dyed material. Okay, it's always associated, as I'm looking here. Okay, for instance, we look in Esther 1:6, right? I'm going to just look in the English, right? White and violet linen. Okay, here we have a veil. Okay, et the parochet. So parochet is the curtain or the veil. Okay, so that's tchelet. Itzim ba'argaman. Tchelet ba'butz. Let's look at this. For 1 second, Second Chronicles 2:14. Get the context here. 2:14. So this has actually to do with the building of the first temple. Okay. 2 Chronicles 2:14. He's trying to work in blah 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 stone work with purple and green yarn and fine linen. So we definitely see that tchelet is a dye, right? It's always associated, seems to be, and I can't find much of an exception that I'm looking at very briefly. Oops, blue, veil of blue, tent of blue, zahavet, tchelet. Let's look here. 5. Okay, so these are, yeah, so tchelet is definitely a color of a dyed material, right? It would seem. Suzahav tchelet v'argaman, petit tchelet, okay, efod kalil tchelet. It's interesting that the efod had a petit tchelet, just like the tzitzit. But we'll get to that. Okay, so petit tchelet v'argaman. Okay, all right. Let me get back to Exodus here. So what I'm trying to say is that it would seem that so tchelet, argaman, v'toklat sheni, washesh, wa izim, right? So these are different types of dyed wool, right? It always seems to be associated with wool. Okay, so even let's see how they translate it here. Tchelet, well, it's translated as blue. Argaman, tola'at sheni. So Argaman is usually translated as purple, and Tola'at Sheni is usually translated as crimson red, okay, or scarlet, okay. And let me just look here for 1 second. Now I have a friend who says that Tola'at Sheni, so Tola'im, Tola'ah is worms, okay? At least in modern Hebrew. Apparently here it's Tolah, okay? But Tola'im is worms. And so I have a friend, knowledgeable in Hebrew, who says that Tola'at Shani is scarlet that was made out of somehow the bodies or the blood of worms, okay? So Shani is a scarlet, and Tola'at is basically worms, okay? And it always usually comes together, Tola'at Shani. So it's possible that if Tola'at Shani is made out of worms, then that would be proof of using a non-kosher animal to make a dye, okay? And that would be one of the arguments against that I've heard from certain Karaites against the chelet being made from what's called the Murex trunculus, the snail. It's now called the Hexaplex trunculus. But this particular snail is that you can never use an unkosher animal to make dyes. It wouldn't make sense that to use an unkosher animal to make dyes for fabrics in the tabernacle. But if it turns out that Tola'at Shani, and I'm not sure that it is made from worms, then that would kind of throw that argument off. At any rate, we have different types of dyed materials here, right? Shesh is usually translated as fine linen, and izim is goat's hair. So I would love to spend a little bit more time, but maybe I'll do this in the afternoon. Okay, looking at this. Let me just see what we can get out of Robert Alter, who I refer to often, as you all know. So we are in Exodus 25:4. Let's see what he has to say about it, if anything. Okay. Exodus 25:4. So he translates it as indigo and purple and crimson and linen and goat hair. So it's very interesting that he translates it as indigo. Indigo is a color, but indigo is also a plant. And this is one of the possibilities. In ancient times, there were a number of different substances that were responsible for making blue dye. One of them was one of the most popular ones was indigo. Another one was woad, WOAD, which I studied this a couple of years ago, so I might be a little bit rusty, but it's a plant I think that is found down in mostly in Egypt, or was very popular in Egypt. I'd have to look it up again. The third one is a stone called lapis lazuli, which is it's actually mentioned. It's I think it's a sapir in the Hebrew, and they would take the stone. If you can rub off kind of if you break it open, it's blue. It's just brilliant blue, and they would rub off dust from it and use it as a blue dye. And actually, this Murex trunculus, or this Hexaplex trunculus, was not really used as a blue dye at all. It was used as a purple dye, and it's in fact the source of the name, the Greek name for the or the name of the Phoenicians. Okay, the Phoenicians actually mean the purple people, because they use a snail or this mollusk to make a purple dye. But this mollusk was not used to make was not really used at all to make blue dye in ancient times. Anyway, it's a big discussion as to was this Murex trunculus. Let me just look it up for a second. Now they call it Hexaplex trunculus, as I said. So there's your Hexaplex trunculus. Okay, and it has has quite a history. So let's just see. Maybe we'll read about it a little bit. So as you can see here from this distribution map, it's found all around the Mediterranean, okay, and the Black Sea, okay, basically all over the Mediterranean. And let's see if we can see anything human use. Okay, so small secretions were used as dye in ancient times. People still eat the snail in Portugal. Well, they eat pretty much anything in Portugal. An ancient dye, the purple dye originated in Phoenician colonies. The Phoenician port cities on the coast of current-day Lebanon exported the dye across the Mediterranean. The ancient method for mass-producing blue dye from Hexaplex trunculus has not been successfully reproduced. Only today, with stronger and therefore less amount of reduction agents, which are more transparent, can we break the original purplish hue molecule and degrade it by introducing, this is bad English, by introducing it to UV sun rays, and as a result get a more blue color only. God, horrible English. Okay, so this is the point. So that the rabbis say that this is the only shell that can be used for making tchelet, that this is the source and the only source of tchelet, and this actually goes back to ancient times. But in fact, this animal, this mollusk, this Hexaplex trunculus, was not used to make blue dye in ancient times. It was used to make purple dye in ancient times, and it was the source. Basically, was what the Phoenicians were known for, as I mentioned. Maybe we should get just a little bit more into that. Okay. Therefore, archaeologists have confirmed Hexaplex trunculus as a species used to create the purple blue dye. Large numbers of shells were recovered from inside ancient live storage chambers that were used for harvesting. Apparently, 10 to 12,000 shells yielded only 1 gram of dye. Because of this, this dye was highly prized, also known as royal purple. It was prohibitively expensive and was used only by the highest ranking aristocracy. Okay. A similar dye, Tyrian purple, which is purple red in color, was made from related species of marine shell, Murex brondatus. This dye, alternatively known as imperial purple, was also prohibitively expensive. Okay, so we have this royal purple and this imperial purple. Jews may have used the pigment from the shells to create a sky blue tchelet dye to put on the fringes that the Torah specifies for the corner of the prayer shawl. This blue dye would have been made by taking the yellow dye solution and letting it sit in the sunlight and then dipping the wool in it. This dye was lost to history until it was rediscovered by Professor Otto Eisner, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Since then, he is reintroduced as the authentic tchelet. It has been reintroduced as the authentic tchelet, and it's once again being reinstated to the Jewish garment, although with only limited acceptance. Okay, so it's possible that Jews in Second Temple period times used this to make the tchelet that was used for the tzitzit, but it's definitely not a foregone conclusion at all. Just want to read this since I am in the process of getting my master's degree in marine biology. This part is interesting to me, and it hopefully will be to you. Hexaplex trunculus, previously known as Murex trunculus, et cetera, is a medium-sized sea snail, a marine gastropod mollusk in the family Muricidae. Oops. It is included in the subgenus whatever. This species is a group of opportunist predatory snails that are known to attack their prey in groups. What is peculiar about this specific species is that they show no preference for the size of their prey regardless of their hunger levels. Okay, snail appears in fossil records dating between the Pliocene and Quaternary periods. Fossilized shells have been found in Morocco, Italy, and Spain. The sea snail is historically important because its hypobronchial gland secretes a mucus used to create a distinctive purple, blue, indigo dye. Ancient Mediterranean cultures, including the Minoans, Canaanites, Phoenicians, Hebrews, and classical Greeks, created dyes from the snails. One of the dye's main chemical ingredients is red dibromo indigotin, the main component of Tyrian purple or tchelet. The dye will turn indigo blue, similar to the color of blue jeans, if exposed to sunlight before the dye sets. Okay. It's a big story. There are many ideas of what this techelet is and what it's not. New York's trunculus purple when dried in shade, but blue when dried in sun. Right. Sounds about right. Okay. A lot more to say about this. We visited in 2018. We visited Tunisia and Tunis, to be exact. And Tunis is basically the site. Tunis, the modern day city of Tunis, is a little bit, I think in my mind now, a little bit east of ancient Carthage. But Carthage, for those of you who know, was a main Phoenician colony on the. It basically overtook, in a certain sense. It's a colony that basically became greater than the original culture, right? Carthage was a huge and important city on the northern coast of Africa, and eventually destroyed by the Romans in what's called the Punic Wars. Punic is the Roman version of Phoenician, right? So this was a Phoenician colony, and one of their main exports, or what they were known for, was creating this, was using this Murex trunculus to create this Tyrian purple. And in fact, as I mentioned, the word Phoenician basically means purple. It comes from the Greek word for purple. In fact, this was all a couple of years ago, so I'm a little bit rusty. If you asked me 3 years ago or so, I could give you a PhD thesis on the topic, but now I'm a little bit rusty, but let's take a look. Phoenicia. So let's look at the etymology, history, origins, blah, 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 blah. I'm just going to say something about purples. So the Phoenicians were Semitic-speaking people, right? And the Phoenician language, and you can even see it in Carthage, it's similar to Hebrew. I mean, you can almost understand it. When I was reading some of the inscriptions in Tunis, is a museum known as the oh God, what is the name of that museum called again? Now I have to check. It's famous. The Bardo. That's what it is. Museum Tunis. Bardo. Yeah. So if you ever happen to be in Tunis, visit the Bardo. It's very, very, very interesting. At any rate, you could see the inscriptions, and it's basically in this Paleo script, and it's very similar to Hebrew. And you can actually understand it. Basically, it's very similar to Hebrew. I won't say identical, but very similar. Okay. At any rate, and that's what they spoke in Carthage. In fact, the word Carthage, Carthage is in Phoenician is Kart Hadasht. Kart Hadash. So they had this tough ending, the tut ending, but it's equivalent to the Hebrew Kiryah Hadashah, and Kiryah Hadashah means the new city. Okay, because it was a colony that I believe, if I remember correctly, that's one of the reasons it was called the new city. But also there was another city and it still exists today, about 20 miles southwest of Carthage, known as Utica. If you've ever heard of a place called Utica, New York, it's named after the city in Tunis called Utica, but in Phoenician it's Attica, and Attica means ancient or old city. Just like today when we speak about the old city of Jerusalem, you say the Ir Attica, Ha'ir Attica, the old city, right? So Utica was the old city, and Carthage, Kart Hadash, Kiryah Hadashah, was the new city. At any rate, I digress. So the Phoenicians were Semitic-speaking people of somewhat unknown origin who emerged in the Levant around 3000 BC. The term Phoenicia is an ancient Greek exonym. It was an exonym. It's an endonym. Okay, so an exonym is what other people call. So an endonym is what people call themselves. An exonym is what people call other people. So what would be an example? I don't know. I can't think of something offhand. Okay. So an ancient Greek exonym that most likely described one of their most famous exports of dye, also known as Tyrian purple. It did not correspond precisely to a cohesive culture or society as it would have been understood understood natively. It is debated whether the Phoenicians were actually distinct from the broader group of Semitic-speaking people known as Canaanites. Historian Robert Drews believes that the term Canaanites corresponds to the ethnic group referred to as Phoenicians by the ancient Greeks. However, according to archaeologist Jonathan N. Tubb, Ammonites, Moabites, Israelites, and Phoenicians undoubtedly achieved their own cultural identities, blah, blah. Okay, a lot to say here. If we look at Tyrian purple for a second, then maybe we'll try to unwind back to Exodus 25. So if we look at Tyrian purple, Tyrian purple, also known as Phoenician red, Phoenician purple, royal purple, or imperial dye, is a reddish purple natural dye. I wonder if there's a picture of it. There we go. Fabrics dyed from different species of sea snail. I don't know what different species are. At any rate, is a reddish purple natural dye. The name Tyrian refers to Tyre, Lebanon, which is just north of the northern border of Israel. In fact, I'm trying to remember, I don't want to say it, sometimes memories play tricks, but when last time I was up in the northern border of Israel, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you can actually see the outskirts of Tyre from northern border of Israel, from Rosh Nikra, along the seacoast. My mind may be playing tricks on me, but that's what I seem to remember. At any rate, okay, this is secretion produced by several species of predatory sea snails in the family Muiridae. Rock snails originally known by the name Murex. In ancient times, extracting this dye involved tens of thousands of snails and substantial labor, and as a result, the dye was highly valued. The main chemical is whatever. Biological pigments were often difficult to acquire, and the details of their production were kept secret by the manufacturers. Tyrian purple is a pigment made from the mucus of several species of Murex snail. And there's our snail, the Hexaplex trunculus, it's now called. Production of Tyrian purple for use as a fabric dye began as early as 1200 BCE by the Phoenicians, and was continued by the Greeks and Romans until 1453 CE with the fall of Constantinople. The pigment was expensive and complex to produce, and items colored with it became associated with power and wealth. Right, there are actually restrictions. I remember learning when we were in Tunisia that there were restrictions. You could actually be put to death for wearing royal purple or for wearing Tyrian purple. The color of textiles from this period provides, I think that was in Roman times or under Roman law. The color of textiles from this period provides insight into socio-cultural relationships within ancient societies, in addition to providing insight, technological advancements. All right, let's skip ahead a little bit, and then we'll get back to Exodus. Tyrian purple may first have been used by the ancient Phoenicians as early as 1570 BCE. It has been suggested that the name Phoenicia itself means land of purple. The dye was greatly prized in antiquity because the color did not easily fade, but instead became brighter with weathering and sunlight. It came in various shades, most prized being that of black-tinted clotted blood. Because it was extremely difficult to make, Tyrian purple was expensive. The 4th century BCE historian Theopompus reported purple for dyes fetched its weight in silver at Colophon in Asia Minor. The expense meant that purple-dyed textiles became status symbols whose use was restricted by sumptuary laws. Okay. The most senior Roman magistrates wore a toga praetexta, a white toga edged with a stripe of Tyrian purple. The even more sumptuous toga picta, solid Tyrian purple with a gold stripe, was worn by generals celebrating a Roman triumph. Let's see if they even have a picture of it. Okay. All right, a lot more to say about this subject, obviously, but I think we should get back to Exodus 25 and sum up what we've kind of investigated here. So we've spoken about a number of things, and one of the things we seem to see is that Tcheret, Argaman, Tola'at, Shani, these were all different types of dyed fabrics, right? So Tcheret is not a, shall we say, standalone color, like let's say blue or yellow or something like that. It's a color of a dyed fabric. Okay. In ancient times, to sum up, there were 3 main sources of tchelet, and this Murex trunculus was not one of them. So there was woad. So woad is Isatis tinctora, and you can even see in the scientific name tinctora, right? Tinct means tincture or color or paint, right? It's the Roman, I guess the Latin word is tinctus, if I remember correctly. So Isatis tinctus, also called woad, dyer's wood, or galastum. It's called that. Is a flowering plant in the family Brassicaceae. It is occasionally known as aspen. Jerusalem woad is also the name of a blue dye produced from the leaves of the plant. Woad is native to the steppe and desert zones of the Caucasus. Okay, I thought it was from Egypt, but my mistake. Central Asia to eastern Siberia and Western Asia, but is now also found in southeastern and central Europe and western North America. So that's woad. So that was a major source of blue dye in ancient times, produced from the leaves of the plant. And then you also had a plant called indigo. Oops, not indigop. And indigo. Indigo. Okay, so that's the color. Indigo, a low-cost airline based in India. No. Indigo restaurant, a restaurant in Mumbai, India. Okay. So indigo means, if I remember correctly, comes from the word India, but we're looking for the plant. Naturalism, indigo bush. So let's go to indigo dye. Let's go to indigo plants. No. Let's go to indigo dye. Here we go. So Indigofera is a large genus of over 700 species of flowering plants belonging to the pea family. You can even see from the leaves here that it basically looks like a pea tree. I mean, it looks like a pea plant, right? If you know pea leaves or pea plants, it looks exactly like this with these kind of series of leaves here, and these flowers look very similar to pea flowers. And they also smell very sweet pea flowers. If you ever smelled like sweet pea flowers, they're widely distributed through the tropical and subtropical regions of the world. Let's see uses. Indigo dye. Several species, especially, just one second here. Okay, look it up later. Several species, especially Indigofera tinctoria and Indigofera sofrutiscosa, are used to produce the dye indigo. Scraps of indigo-dyed fabric lightly dyed with plants from the genus Indigofera, discovered at Huaca Prieta, predate, wherever that is, in Peru. Predate Egyptian indigo-dyed fabrics by more than 1,500 years. Colonial planters in the Caribbean grew indigo and transplanted its cultivation when they settled in the colony of South Carolina and North colonies of South Carolina, colony of South Carolina, North Carolina, where the people blah blah blah. Let's skip ahead a little bit. Okay, so that's indigo. Okay, and then a major third source, although I think this was much less than the other ones, was lapis lazuli. So here we go, lapis lazuli, or lapis for short, is a deep blue metamorphic rock, and there you can see it right there. Okay, so you can see that's beautiful. Oh, if you ever see it and ever get a chance to see it in person, it's just absolutely unbelievably beautiful. Is a deep blue metamorphic rock used as a semi-precious stone that has been prized since antiquity for its intense color. As early as the 7th century millennium BC, lapis lazuli was mined in the Sar-e-Sang mines, etc., in Afghanistan. Lapis lazuli artifacts dated to 7570 BC have been found at Birana, which is the oldest site of Indus Valley civilization. Lapis was highly valued by the Indus Valley civilization. Lapis beads have been found, etc., etc. Okay. Color, sources, uses. Lapis takes an excellent polish and can be made into jewelry. So here's jewelry. It really is a beautiful stone. Oh my God. Carvings, boxes, mosaics, ornaments, small statues, and vases, interior items, and finishing buildings can also be made with lapis. So let's skip ahead here. It doesn't mention used as a dye. Let's see here. Lapis was ground. Here it is. During the Renaissance, lapis was ground and processed to make the pigment ultramarine for use in frescoes and oil painting. So that's how it was. It was ground and then it made a blue pigment. It says here during the Renaissance, but I think it was also used for that beforehand. And of course, lapis lazuli is in the Torah is mentioned, or at least they believe that's the word sapir, okay, which we will get to. So, and they usually translate it as sapphire, actually. So let's even take a look at that for 1 second. One second. There it is. Okay. And sapphire is sapir, which occurs in Exodus 28. So that'll be next week's Parsha, right? And let's go check the BDB for a second. So sapphire, perhaps also lapis lazuli. So they believe that the sapphire, this sapir in Hebrew, sapir is lapis lazuli. Okay, and that's also mentioned in the Torah. So those were the three main sources. Okay, I take it back. Maybe lapis lazuli was not an ancient source, according to what we just read right now, but certainly indigo and woad were ancient sources of the dye, of a blue dye. And this hexaplex or Murex trunculus, this mollusk, this snail, was a major source of the Phoenician or the Tyrian purple, Phoenician purple, but not necessarily the blue dye of the Tchelet. Anyway, there's so much more to say about this. As I always say, if anyone is looking to write it for a PhD thesis to write, that would be a great topic. Excuse me 1 second. Actually, you could probably write about 10 different PhD theses on that subject. There's so much to say about it. But now let's unwind a little bit since we got sidetracked, but that's fine. That's what this part of the Torah study is about. It's about sidetracking a little bit. And we will unwind and get back somehow to Exodus 25. If I do a little bit of back. Okay, so that's Exodus 27. Take it back this way. Exodus 25. So we have these three substances, right? We have tchelet, argaman, tolat, cheni. They're often mentioned together, and they seem to be dyes, fabric dyes, right? They're not just standalone when they're used in the Torah. At least they're not standalone colors. They're dyes, as I mentioned. A friend of mine, well, I guess you can call him a friend, but I'll mention his name by name. Hakham Yaakov ben Israel, who is very, very knowledgeable about a lot of things. I must admit. And he claims, and perhaps rightfully so, that when it says tola'at shani, that tola'ah is referring to a worm. So it's crimson that's made somehow from the blood of the worm, and therefore is an unkosher animal. At any rate, we somehow got sidetracked when we wanted to look at what Robert Alter has to say about these thingies. So indigo and purple and crimson. Robert Alter says these, at any rate, are the ends of the spectrum reflected by these color words. I have no idea what he's saying. There being some margin of doubt about the precise indication of chromatic terms and considerably more doubt about the identification of the precious stones in these lists. The first two colors indicate dyes extracted from a species of murex and a Phoenician manufacture. The third is a dye derived from the eggs of scale insects found on oak trees. Again, this is, I think, all speculation. Both processes of dye production were immensely laborious and costly, and hence these colors were especially for royal garments throughout the eastern part of the Mediterranean. One may recall Agamemnon treading on purple in the great welcome carpet scene. Clytemnestra stages for him near the beginning of the Orestia. I have to think back to my Greek literature from high school. It is hard to imagine that these precious dyes would have been accessible to the Hebrews in the wilderness. This is one of several indications that the picture of the tabernacle is in many ways an ideal projection rather than a strictly historical account. Okay, that's Robert Alter's take on it. So, screw him. But at any rate, what he does say, what that's interesting here is he says the first two are extracted from a series of murex. That's a snail we spoke about. And the third is from the eggs of scale insects found on oak trees. And I'm not sure what scale insects are, but I'm assuming it's some kind of, again, tola'ah, like some kind of worm, basically. Okay? They scale the tree, perhaps. Or maybe they have scales. So there we go. There we go. So we're going to leave it at that. Okay. Any questions? Any comments? Anybody want to add anything? Alrighty then. So we have Tchelet Argaman v'Tola'at Sheni Shesh. Is just usually translated as fine linen. Esther 1:6, material of pavement. Interesting. So maybe related to shayish in modern Hebrew, which is marble. Shesh, byssus. So byssus is actually that's weird. At least in the context of marine biology, it's these threads that certain types of mussels excrete. Huh. Shesh's byssus, probably from the Egyptian Suktim. Interesting. Spinning, weaving, and wearing of linen in Egypt, Erman. So what this is saying, that's interesting. So let's look at Esther 1:6 for a second. So here we have So this is the Achashverosh's ball, describing the glamour of the mishteh of the ball. And pillars of, and shesh here is translated as marble. Interesting. So I'm assuming that's just a completely different word. Amudei shesh. In modern Hebrew, marble is shayish. Right? Even if you talk about the countertop, they always call it the shayish, even if it's not made out of marble. Mitot zahav, etc. So here shesh seems to be, right, amudei, so pillars of, they translate that as marble. So that's interesting. And also in Song of Songs 5:15, we also have amudei shesh. Interesting. So is it marble? Here they just translate it as byssus. Interesting. But here they translate it as marble. So I'm a bit a bit confused. Material of pavement. So sheish here is bisis, and as we mentioned, let me just read a little bit ahead. Fine Egyptian linen. Boots is a later synonym. So boots we just saw, and linen thrones spun by the women. Exodus 35:25. And the material woven from it, used for garments. For sale. Well, there's a whole study here in and of itself. Anyone want to do a PhD thesis? So, but bisis, as we mentioned, let's look at what bisis is. So what they're saying is correct. So this is bisis, or they call them byssal threads. So bisis is a bundle of filaments secreted by many species of bivalve mollusk. That attach the mollusk to a solid surface. So here we go. So here's, for instance, a mussel that's attached to a rock by its bisis. So I guess what they did is, let's get a better, oops. How do I make this bigger? There we go. Yeah, so these threads are excreted by mollusks, and they're basically filaments, and they're what the mollusk uses to attach to a solid surface, and they're also called byssal threads. So I guess what the BDB is saying is that these threads were gathered, and woven somehow into string. Interesting. So, oops. Species from several families of clams have a bisis, including pen shells, true mussels, etc. Bisis filaments are created by certain kinds of marine and freshwater bivalve mollusks, which use the bisis to attach themselves to rocks, substrates, or seabeds. In edible mussels, the inedible bisis is commonly known as the beard and removed before cooking. And here's another picture of the bisis. So I actually had to just recently do a report for my marine biology degree, and we spoke about the bisis, how they can actually create sounds. They can actually make underwater sounds. These kind of clicking sounds as they kind of stretch, or as they're stretched by the tide. At any rate, okay. So many species of mussels secrete bisis threads to anchor themselves to surfaces, with families including the Arcidae, etc., etc. The bisis, or byssal complex, is composed of multiple extracellular collagenous threads that are placed radially by the mussel from a central stem. Each thread is composed of 3 regions. A corrugated part, we don't need to go into this detail. The purpose of the bisis is to keep the mussel attached to the desired surface, and to this end, byssal threads must be able to withstand strong cyclic motion due to tidal action near the shorelines mussels inhabit. Right, so we were just talking about this. The purpose of the bisis is to keep the mussel attached to the desired surface, and to this end, byssal threads must be able to withstand strong cyclic motion due to tidal action near the shorelines mussels inhabit. Right, so these byssal threads can actually, when the shore goes in, when the tide goes in and out, or when there's movement of water, they can actually make these kind of like clicking sounds, like because they're because they're kind of cracking or something like that. I don't remember. Mechanical testing of live mussels has shown that byssal threads can extend 39% before yield and 64% before breaking at a normal strain rate of 10 millimeters per minute. Tensile testing shows that threads exhibit 3 distinct phases, etc., etc. Okay, we don't need to go through all of this. So I guess what the BDB is saying then is that somehow or another, well, maybe it mentions it. Let's see. Maybe it mentions uses of these byssal threads for creating threads. Let's take a look. Historical uses. Byssus often refers to the long, fine, silky threads secreted by the large Mediterranean pen shell Pinna nobilis. The byssus threads from this pinna species can be up to 2.4 inches in length and have historically been made into cloth. No kidding. Wow. See, I learned something new every time I study Torah. Byssus cloth is a rare fabric, also known as sea silk, that is made using the byssus of pen shells as a fiber source. No kidding. So here's critically endangered, of course. Everything's critically endangered these days. So there it is. I don't know if you can see it's byssal threads or it's byssus. Human relevance. The species is the origin of sea silk, which was made from the byssus of the animal. So let's look at sea silk. Sea silk is an extremely fine, rare, and valuable fabric that is made from the long, silky filaments or byssus secreted by a gland in the foot of pen shells. The byssus is used by the gland to attach itself to the seabed. So here's sea silk. My God. No kidding. I never knew this. So that's from the byssus of these mussels or these mollusks. Let's see, what are they? Are they mussels? Huh. Sea silk was produced in the Mediterranean region from the large marine bivalve mollusk Pinna nobilis. Until early in the 20th century, the animal whose shell is sometimes almost a meter long. Oh my God, wow. Jeez, it's huge. Adheres itself pointed end down to rocks in the intertidal zone using a tuft of very strong, thin fibers. These byssi or filaments, which can be 6 centimeters long, are spun and when treated with lemon juice turn a golden color which never fades. Wow. The cloth produced from these filaments can be woven even more finely than silk and is extremely light and warm. It was said that a pair of women's gloves made from the fabric could fit into half a walnut shell and a pair of stockings in a snuff box. The cloth attracts clothes moths, the larvae of which will eat it. Okay. Interesting. Huh. Knitted glove made from sea silk. So here's our glove made from the sea silk. And this is the shell with the byssus. And that is a close-up of the byssus. Huh. No kidding. See, I never knew this before. So again, according to the BDB at least, this shesh that's mentioned here, Jordan, Yarden, Boker Tov. So the shesh that's mentioned here, for Yarden who just showed up, if that is my friend Yarden, who I think it is, this shesh that's mentioned here is actually, according to the BDB, comes from these hairs that grow out of this, this is it a muscle? It's a muscle. The hairs that grow out of this muscle, which are then woven like silk. Well, I guess silk comes out of a worm, from a silkworm. So I guess if you can use a worm to make silk, you can use these muscle hairs, this muscle byssus, to make this this sea silk. So if that is the case, and again, a big if for all of these things, then we see that, at least according to Robert Alter, the techelet may or may not come from the Murex trunculus, or the hexaplex trunculus. The argonaman, purple, he would claim comes from, well, he claims that techelet comes from the hexaplex trunculus, from the snail. Okay. The argoman, he says, is basically Tyrian purple or Phoenician purple, which comes from the same species. Tola'at shani may come from a worm. And again, what does Robert Alter say there? A dye derived from the eggs of scale insects found on oak trees. So that would come from a worm. Then we have the shesh, which would come from the byssal threads or the byssus of this species, of this Pinna nobilis mussel. And then we have izim, which is, well, izim is goats. So it's goat skin, right, or goat hair. So these are all speaking about different types of woven fabrics. And I wish we could I would like to spend time going to each one of these. In fact, if I could, I would do the entire study just on these different types of dyes. It's just so fascinating. But we're talking about different types of dyed fabrics, right? Now, what's interesting is if Robert Alter is correct, and he may or may not be, then Techelet and Argaman come from the Murex trunculus, a snail, which is unkosher. Tola'at Shani comes from some kind of worm or creepy crawly thing, which is not kosher. Shesh comes from the hair of the bissel threads, or the hair of a mussel, Mussel, and that's unkosher. So all 1, 2, 3, 4 would all come from unkosher animals, if that were the case. So it would seem that when you're making threads or when you're making dyes, that an animal does not have to be kosher. Assuming if even one of these is correct, right, then that would be the case. There's a lot more to say about that. Maybe in this afternoon study we'll go through each of these items and look a little bit more. Let's see. Tola'at Shani. Look at this for 1 second. Okay. Died with the Coccus ilicis. So the BDB mentions this species. Let's check it out. This is C. Shani. So let's look at Shani. Shani's scarlet. Probably, it mentions the same species, Coccus, which I don't know what that is, which attaches itself to the leaves and twigs of Quercus crucifera, the dried body of female. Okay, well, let's look it up. Hermes, an insect. Ooh, that is nasty. My God, that looks like my mother-in-law. No, I'm just joking. Okay, Kermes is a genus of scale insects. So what is a scale insect? Small insects of the order Hemiptera, suborder, whatever, of dramatically variable appearance and extreme sexual dimorphism. That means the males and the females look very different from each other, or have very different features from each other. They comprise the infraorder, blah, 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 blah. Let's scale insects for 1 second. Waxy scales on a cycad leaf. Okay. Oh my. Huh. So these are scale insects. And I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess we could read that, but let's not get that far into it. So Kermes is a genus of scale insects in the order Hemiptera. They feed on the sap of evergreen oaks. The females produce a red dye, also called Kermes. That's a source of natural crimson. The word Kermes is derived from Persian or Turkish kirmiz, crimson. Oh, that's where you get the word crimson. Both the color and the dye stuff. Huh. No kidding. So let's look up crimson. Let's look up kermes for a second. Kermes is a red dye derived from the dried bodies of the females of a scale insect in the genus Kermes, particularly Kermes vermilion. Vermilion is red. The Kermes insects are native in the Mediterranean region and are parasites living on the sap of the host plant, the Kermes oak. Quercus, which, by the way, I think Quercus is where you get the word cork. because oaks are used, their cork oaks are used to make cork, the barks of cork oaks. Okay, Crucifera and the Palestine oaks, Quercus, whatever. These insects were used as a red dye since antiquity by the ancient Egyptians, Mesopotamians, Indians, Greeks, Romans, and Iranians. The Kermes dye is a rich red, a crimson. It has good color fastness in silk and wool. I think that means it doesn't fade. Okay. In silk and wool was much esteemed in the medieval era for dyeing silk and wool, particularly scarlet cloth. Post-medievally, it was replaced by other red dyes, starting with cochineal, I think is made from, yeah. Okay, so Kermes ultimately derives from the Sanskrit word, I can't read Sanskrit, so kirmija, meaning worm made. This was adopted into Persian and later Arabic as kermes. Interesting. Worm made, kirmija. Huh. The modern English word Kermes was borrowed from the French word Kermes. Okay. Kermes dye is of ancient origin. Jars of Kermes have been found in a Neolithic cave burial in Adauste, north of whatever. The early Egyptians made use of the Kermes dye in the Middle Ages. Rich crimson and scarlet silks dyed with Kermes in the new silk weaving centers of Italy and Sicily exceeded the legendary Tyrian purple in status and desirability. The dye stuff was called grain in all Western European languages because the desiccated eggs resembled fine grains of wheat and sand. That's disgusting. And textiles dyed with Kermes were described as dyed in the grain. Huh. Maybe as opposed to dyed in the wool. Woolens were frequently dyed blue with woad before spinning and weaving, and then piece dyed in Kermes, producing a wide range of colors from blacks and grays to browns, murreys, purples, and sanguines. One source dated back to the 12th century notes that Kermes dye adheres best to animal-based fibers, wool, silk, etc., rather than to plant-based fibers, cotton, linen, etc. By the 14th and 15th century, brilliant, full-grain, pure Kermes scarlet was by far the most esteemed, most regal color for luxury woolen textiles in the Low Countries, England, France, Spain, and Italy. Following the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire, Mexican cochineal, which produced a stronger dye and could thus be used in smaller quantities, replaced Kermes dyes in general use in Europe. The biblical scarlet. All right, we're going to get to that in a second. Let's take a look at the coronation mantle of Roger II of Sicily, silk dyed with Kermes and embroidered with gold thread and pearls. So that's Kermes, which may be the Tola'at Shani. So, biblical scarlet, Tola'at Shani. The English word for the biblical scarlet, Exodus 25:4, which is where we are right now, is merely a literal translation taken from the Koine Greek, kokinon, as found in the Septuagint, meaning scarlet. By an analysis of the English word alone, unlike the original Hebrew biblical text, Tola'at Shani, is not readily understood that the scarlet color is derived from a living organism. Right. Source of the color being derived from a living organism explicitly stated in the Jerusalem Talmud is implied by the name Tola'at, worm, or worm of scarlet, Tola'at Shani, in which the ancients in the Roman world only knew as grani okum, the grain of a scarlet yarn. Scarlet was one of the three principal pigments used in the temple curtain, appurtenances and sacred vestments, etc., for a total of 5 basic colors: gold, blue, purple, scarlet, and white. Threads of each color were twined together to form thick yarns, the golden threads being pounded and cut from sheet metal, while white was the natural bleached linen, the others made from either wool or silk yarns that had been dyed with various pigments. The curtain was skillfully woven together in a loom to make winged cherubim motifs. Scarlet dyed yarn was also thrown as an adjunct into the burning ashes of the red heifer. Really, I don't remember that offhand. Numbers 9:16, 19:6. Really, isn't that interesting? As was used as an adjunct in the purification ritual of lepers who had been healed. Let's take a look at that. Numbers 19:6. Oops. Let's take a look at Numbers 19:6. Telling you, when I do these Torah studies, I just never know when I'm going to uncover. And it's just so fascinating. I don't plan the studies in advance. I just let things go where they may. So Numbers 19:6. I'll just go to the English to make it go a little bit more quickly. So the Lord said, Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, this is a requirement of the law that Yahweh has commanded. Tell the Israelites to bring you a red heifer without defect or blemish, and that has never been under a yoke. Give to Eleazar, the priest. It is to be taken outside the camp and slaughtered in his presence. And Eleazar, the priest, is to take some of its blood on his finger and sprinkle it 7 times towards the front of the tent of meeting. While he watches, the heifer is to be burned. Its hide, flesh, blood, and intestines. The priest also takes some cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet wool and throw them onto the burning heifer. After that, the priest must wash his clothes and bathe themselves with water. Wow. So scarlet wool is used with the red heifer, the para aduma, and this is scarlet, right, which is red. Well, we also have hyssop. Hyssop is not red. Cedar wood is, I guess, maybe brownish, but not really red. Interesting. Okay, we'll leave that at that. So, while production of the crimson or scarlet dye from Kermes scale insect had traditionally been an art preserved with medieval dyers, the practice seems to have been lost for many centuries. Late exponents of Jewish law were baffled by what was meant in the Compendium of Oral Jewish Law, the Tosefta, when it stated that the tola'at shani, or scarlet colored wool, may only be utilized from the tola'at, which abounds in the mountainous regions for the preparation of the dye used in the priest's girdles. Dye's crimson or scarlet orange tinge is alluded to in an early rabbinic source, whatever. It's already a much later source, neither red nor green, but of intermediate color. The 10th century biblical exegete Sadia Gaon opines that the scarlet colored fabric was kirmes, derived from the Kermes insect, which produced a color ranging from Venetian scarlet to crimson. According to Saadia, the dye was applied to silk yarns. A rare 10th century Arabic document was retrieved by the Department of Land of Israel Studies professor Zohar Amar, in which he was able to produce the dye extract using antique methods. Okay. Should we read a little bit further? Out of the 4 Kermes scale insects tested in Israel, the wingless female Kermes echinatus, with her unhatched eggs still in her body, yielded the brightest red colorant. That's disgusting. The scale insect is first dried and ground to a powder. The dye stuff is then placed in a pot of water and cooked on a low heat, which turns the water red. The water is then strained and is ready for use. Those familiar with the dyeing technique have noted that before inserting the fabric into the bath containing the dye solution, fabric is first dipped into a bath of dissolved alum, which, when added to the dye solution, gives to the fabric its brightish reddish orange color, besides serving as a mordant. Whatever a mordant is, a fixative. Okay. Darker shades are achieved by repeating the dyeing process several times, having the fabric dry and re-dyed. According to field research conducted by Amar and his colleagues, the female K. echinatus insect, which has a camouflage color of gray to reddish brown, produces the dye pigment in both her body and in her eggs only at the peak of her adulthood, which continues for no more than 1 month around July and August. A delay in harvesting the scale insect with eggs may result in a significant reduction in dye production. After collecting, the insects are first dried in the shade for a period of 1 week. That's disgusting. Ground to a powder, and then steeped in water for 45 minutes, and which maintains a low heated temperature of 60 degrees Celsius. To this hot bath is added the fabric to absorb the dye. Heating the dye solution to a temperature more than this is liable to destroy the pigment or cause fading. When alum is added to the dye, substance is a mordant, a bright red-orange hue is obtained, which color is then made color fast. Chemical analysis. Amar found that the host trees in the land of Israel, which is some kind of oak, produced various sizes of the scale insect, a varied size of the scale insect, Karaites eucanatus, the largest of which being found in Israel's north, particularly in the upper Galilee region and northern parts of the Golan Heights, etc. However, the scale insect's distribution was not uniform. Okay, at any rate. So it's mentioned in literature, so let's take a look first. So wool dyed with the scale insect Karaites. Oops, I'm gonna make this. Let's try this again. It doesn't get any bigger than that. Okay. Let's read just a little bit further. Scarlet crimson features prominently in ancient lore. Though your skins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. That's famous. Though they are red like crimson, they shall become like wool. Other accounts mention scarlet as being one of the chief colors used to decorate the bridal chamber. That's etc. That's later on. During the Second Temple period, the annual Jewish ritual of the Day of Atonement required that a man would lead away a scapegoat, and when he reached a precipitous ravine some distance away, he would tie scarlet crimson thread to its horns, pushing it down to its death. Okay, so it's rabbinical also. I don't think that's mentioned in the Torah. Although it might be. That would be number 16, but we'll check it later. Okay. Wow, this is just such fascinating stuff. It really is. Really unbelievable. So now we've learned, I almost feel like going into this more, like going through each one of these one by one, getting to the bottom of it, but it would just take hours and days and years. So we have Tola'at Shani, is this scale insect, so not really a worm. Maybe this Kermes insect. These guys, geez, they're ugly. Ooh. Are dried, the females are dried and ground and then boiled, so not boiled, but heated, and then the fabric is dipped in them. So what have we learned here? Since we should get back to the Torah, we've learned that so tchelet may or may not be from the snail, the Hexaplex trunculus. Argamon, if it is ancient Phoenician or Tyrian purple, is from the Hexaplex trunculus. Tola'at Shani may be from this Kermes scale insect. And Tola'at Shani may mean worm of scarlet. Okay. Shesh, we learned maybe from the byssal threads, the hairs that come out of some bivalves that help them attach, like that help muscles attach to the substrate, to the surface, rocks or whatever the case may be. And those are taken and woven and made into something called sea silk. And then izim is goat hairs. So these are all types of dyed fabrics, except maybe the goat hairs are not dyed. I don't know. How do they translate here? Tashim, and that's later on. So 1 second here. So I think he just translates it as goat hairs. Yeah, and goat hair. Okay. Now we have more things. So here we have goat hairs. Now we have orot elim, adamim, orot tachashim, atzei shitim. So orot elim. So ayal is a ram. So ram skins, right? Let's go back to Robert Alter for a second here. So red and ram skins. So that's how he translates the orot elim ma'adamim. So ma'adamim is from adom, which means red, right? Like Edom, right? And so orot elim ma'adamim is red and ram skins. Orot tahashim. So there's a big question as to what tahashim is. I think Robert Alter referred to this here, so let's just read his explanation. Some people say it's dolphins. So ochre-dyed skins. Many translations interpret the Hebrew tahashim as dolphins or dugongs, but a more plausible connection has been made with an Akkadian term that indicates a yellow or orange dye. That would be in keeping with the focus on brilliantly dyed stuff in the previous verse. So they don't know what it is, right? But tahashim has been speculated that it is dolphins. So let's just look at the BDB on tahashim. Perhaps porpoise. So there's a perhaps here. BDB. And perhaps the animal yielding it, probably the dugong. Compare Arabic dolphin. So they don't really know. So some kind of marine mammal, perhaps like the dolphin or the dugong. Unclear. With Atzei Shitim, Shitim is acacia. Acacia you can see growing all over Israel, and including in Timna Park, which I mentioned before. Again, if you're ever in Israel near Eilat, go to Timna Park and see the replication of the tabernacle. Definitely worth a day trip. My God, and how? And it doesn't even take a day. It's maybe half an hour, 45 minutes north of Eilat. Go there for an hour or two, and also Timna Park is just spectacular. And you can see this replication of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. You can go back and sit on the beach for dinner back in Eilat. Okay, so these are all these different types of animals. Okay, we orot elim ma adamim, we orot tachoshim, we atzei shitim. So shitim is acacia. I'll just show a picture of an acacia tree very quickly. And there you go. It's an acacia tree. Anything to say about it here? That description uses acacia in ancient Egypt. Exodus 25:10. Acacia wood is mentioned as the construction material for the Ark of the Covenant. Well, obviously a lot more to say about this as well, but I think we should just move on. Okay, shemen lema'or. So here's the lighting oil, which for sure is olive oil. Whenever they say shemen and they don't specify what, then it's olive oil. 1 second here. Just want to see one thing. Okay. Oops. Shemen Ma'or. Then we have Bisamim, L'Shemen HaMishcha. So we're going to get an exact recipe for the Shemen HaMishcha, the anointing oil, right? Which includes some of my favorite spices. And one second. What was I just thinking? Forget it. Okay. And L'Shemen HaMishcha u L'Kitoret Asamim. And for the Kitoret Asamim, the incense, basically, right? They translate as aromatic incense. So Kitoret is incense, right? The Kitor means to burn. Right? So smoke, odor, burning. So yeah, the translate is incense. And Ketoret Samim. So Samim, they translate as sweet, or it's often translated as sweet, or let's see what they say here. Spice. Only plural absolute Samim, and only in Chronicles. So okay. Yes, Samim is spices or sweet smelling senses. So again, Robert Alter translates that as aromatic incense, Samim. In modern Hebrew, Samim is drugs. And I have a true story. A friend told me a true story that he came to Israel, and he had only known Hebrew from his religious studies growing up in the United States. So Samim here is obviously spices, or aromatic. It's basically spices, right? But in modern Hebrew, it's said as drugs. So he was looking for spice. He was looking for spices I guess it was like a Friday before Shabbat or whenever, and he was going to the shuk, the marketplace in Jerusalem, and he was walking around from store to store and asking him if they where he can buy samim. So he was walking around. He says, and he was asking them where he could buy samim, which again he thought he was saying where can he buy spices, but in modern Hebrew, samim is drugs. So he's going from store to store in the shuk and asking where he can buy drugs, and drugs meaning narcotics. And finally, some shopkeeper realized what was going on and explained to him the errors of his ways. But that was a true story that I heard firsthand from a friend of mine. Okay. So yeah. So we have bisamim, so different spices or different spices for the ketota samim. So we have bisamim and we have samim. So let's take a look at the difference between those two words, right? So bosem, in modern Hebrew, bosem is perfume. So we have bosem and we have samim. Right? So they're not related, right? Because bisamim is with a sin. Okay? More besem is the singular. And samim, or sam, is with a samech. So they're not related at all. So bisamim here is translated by the BDB as spice or balsam, right? And for in fact, the word balsam is related to the word bosom etymologically, comes from it, or they both have a common root. And then we have samim, which is also translated as spice. So spice is spice. So they're related, but there's some subtle differences, right? So we'll have to keep an eye out for that. Okay, there's samim and there's bisamim. So bisamim is clearly, fragrance materials because that's the context here. Okay, bisamim. Okay, leketoret asamim. So Robert Alter translates ketoret asamim to the as the how do you do it again? Aromatic incense, right? So the incense of nice aromas. So just to point out that these are two different words. Okay, now we have different types of rocks that are going to be used or that are going to be they're looking to have donated. And we have avnei shoham, avnei miluim, le'afod, le'efod, la'choshen. Well, this is the first mention of the ephod and the choshen, I believe. So we don't even know there's going to be an ephod and the choshen, right? 25:7. And the choshen, this is the breastplate for the chief Kohen, right? And that's its first mention there. So we have two types, avnei shoham and avnei miluim. So miluim is the filling rocks. How do they translate it here? Yeah, rocks for setting. Le'efod le'choshen. So those are the rocks that are going to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. Okay, so the different types of rocks. Shoham. So here the translation I'm getting is onyx. Robert Alter translates it as carnelian stones. So again, the problem with this is nobody knows what they really are. The different people, different professors have done different types of research and nobody knows what they are. So if it's onyx, let's look at onyx for a second. My sister has a cat named Onyx. So that's onyx. Red onyx, black onyx. So it is a type of stone. Onyx primarily refers to the parallel-banded variety of the silicate mineral chalcedony. So that may relate back to why chalcedony, chalcedony. No, I don't think it's the same word. Let's look at carnelian stones. That's what Robert Alter translates it as. Carnelian. Carnelian. So different, right? So the carnelian is sard, blah, blah, blah. So he translates carnelian stone. The NIV translates it as onyx. The BDB translates it as, let's see here. Yeah, identification dubious. The BDB says perhaps onyx or chrysoprasus, whatever the heck that is. Let's look that up. Oh, that's another type of gemstone. So this is the problem, right? We don't know ancient Hebrew. Beautiful. Huh. Wow, that's gorgeous. We don't know ancient Hebrew, so we get different opinions as to what this Hebrew word shoham may mean, right? Let's get another opinion. We could look at Rashi. See what he has to say. So this is Exodus 25:7. If we go to Rashi, Exodus 25:7. Oops. So, start reading. What the heck does that mean? Oh, that's stupid. 25:7. Avnei Shoham. שתיים הוצרכו שם לצורך האפוד האמור בבעתה תצווה. I'm sorry. בבעתה תצווה. Okay, so he's just making a reference to where it's going to be mentioned explicitly. Miluim. So this is now this word miluim. So he doesn't mention what shoham is at all. So he doesn't render an opinion at all as to what type of stone it is. Okay. So that's that. Maybe it's onyx. According to the NIV, it's onyx. According to Robert Alter, it's carnelian. And according to the BDB, it's chrysoprase. So we don't really know what it is. Robert Alter always has good opinions. That's why I refer to him a lot. So maybe there's some list here of it being used. Let's just look at the history. The red variety, okay. It's a brownish red mineral commonly used as a semi-precious gemstone, similar to carnelian sard, which is generally harder and darker. The difference is not rigidly defined, and the two names are often used interchangeably. Both carnelian and sard are varieties of the silica mineral chalcedony. Okay. Colored by impurities from iron oxide, the color can vary greatly, ranging from pale orange to an intense, almost black coloration. Significant localities include Yanacodo, wherever the heck that is, Peru, okay, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So there we go. And Avnei Miluim is just setting stones or stones for setting. Stones for setting in the ephod and in the breastplate, as Robert Alter translates it. Avnei Miluim le'ephod u la'choshen. And we'll finish with these two verses. Wa'asu li mikdash u'eshachanti b'tocham. Make me well, they translate this as tabernacle, but mikdash is a holy place from the word kodesh, right? So tabernacle, a sanctuary. There we go. That's the better. That's much better. I'm sorry. Mishkan is usually translated as tabernacle. So mikdash is a sanctuary, a holy place. My battery's going to run out soon, so I'll stop. And I will dwell among them. V'chol asher ani mar'eh otcha et tavnit hamishkan v'et tavnit kol kelav v'chein ta'asu. So there we go. According to all that I shall show you, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its kelov, its vessels, so shall you do. So he's going to show, right? It's actually going to show Moshe this, and it's mentioned later on. And we spoke about that and its relevance to the oral law or lack thereof. So let's make a list. I like making lists before the battery runs out. So Torah, here's my big spreadsheet. Move this out of the way. Nobody can see that on the screen. So let's go to, we were working on the journeys of Israel. We're working on Jethro. Now let's make a new one, and we will call it materials. Call it how should we call it? Mishkan materials. It's not really Mishkan. Call it all right, we'll call it Mishkan materials. What? Tabernacle materials. Tabernacle materials. So we have a bunch listed here. So we have the Hebrew name. And then we have various English possibilities. English name number 1, English name number 2. So let's just start here. So these are the ones that are listed. So first we have Tchelet. Oh, I'm sorry. We actually have to start here. Zahav. And we'll finish off. All right, my battery's gonna run out even before it might. Okay, so we have Zahav. And that is gold for sure. We have, oh, you know what? I should have done this differently. Let me do this differently. Trash this. Delete. So I'm going to duplicate this so I can get the kind of same formatting. Duplicate. We'll rename Tabernacle Materials. Tabernacle Materials. So here, okay, we'll do verse. Hebrew name. We'll do verse. Hebrew name. English equivalents. This. Goodbye. So this is, we are in verse Exodus 25:3. We have Zahav. And we know that that's gold. Okay, good. Next, we have Kesef. And that is silver. Also in Exodus 25:3. Nechoshet is translated as bronze. Whoop. So bronze, also Exodus 25:3. Now we have Tchelet. Tchelet. So this is now Exodus 25:4. And we don't know what it is, right? So it could be, so it's, you know, how would you even translate it? English equivalents. So we could say the Murex trunculus or the hexaplex trunculus. Okay. We could say maybe it's from indigo. How we do this hexaplex trunculus or indigo. Or, whoa, no, I don't want you to see that. Indigo, woad, lapis lazuli. I don't think we should even put. Okay. And then we have next argaman, which we did speak about. It's also Exodus 25:4. My battery is about to go dead. I think I'm going to stop it here. So this we could say is Tyrian from the hexaplex trunculus, from that snail. Right? Again, these are all questions. We don't really know. All speculation. Okay, my battery is about to go dead, so we can continue this later on. I'm going to end the morning study, and we will have the afternoon study in about 2.5 hours. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this morning study. I hope you learned from it as much as I did. And I'm going to have to end now because my battery is about to go dead. I could plug in, but it's time to end anyway, the morning study. So see you this afternoon in about 2.5 hours for the afternoon study. It's posted in the announcement, the links for the afternoon study. And hope to see you there. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Bye-bye.